Hello YouTube. I really became interested in this episode of World War II after I learned that the famous Soviet Arctic pilot Akuratov was involved in the investigation. He had several significant UFO encounters more than 70 years ago, and he was not afraid to push for explanations. Please see my Arctica playlist. So let me begin. Here's what is known generally. Scientists have collected about 500 items belonging to the secret German World War II weather station Schatzgraber, treasure hunter, that operated on the Franz Josef Land archipelago in the Arctic region in the years 1943-1944. This is what we know so far. The wartime items were sent to Arkhangelsk in Russia for the further study and to join the collections of the Russian Arctic National Park Museum. There are fragments of military equipment, household and personal items, parts of meteorological devices or instruments. Part of the equipment is dated by 1942 to 1943. There is also a sack fragment of dated 1942 and items with Nazi symbols, according to TASS, the Russian news agency. The weather station was designed for monitoring ships and U-boats along the Northern Sea route and consisted of several bunkers and firing points. It had broadcasted over 700 weather reports before, in July, the whole team was evacuated due to flashworm disease. Now the station is almost totally destroyed and whatever remains for it. So this is what we know, this is what we're being told. Now it's no secret that since the beginning of the World War II, the Northern Sea route has become the subject of close attention of the admirals of the Kriegsmarine, Nazi Navy. It was a key transport artery of the USSR, along with convoys with coal, timber, nickel, weapons, non-ferrous metals for the defense plants, and food. This is what regularly was transported there. During the 4 years of the war, more than 4 million tons of cargo were transported along the Northern Sea route. Despite the powerful and well-armed naval forces, Germany could not take control of the Arctic. But from my research, this was not the only mission that the Nazis had in the Soviet Arctic areas, and not only Soviet, but particular in that area. But that has to do with their lurid beliefs, and we'll get to that. However, I don't think we're being told everything, but let me continue. The Wonderland Project, why Hitler built a secret base in the Soviet Arctic. You see, in the Arctic region of the front of the World War II, the Germans did not achieve their goals. Despite two offensive attempts in 1941 and 1942, the fascists were unable to capture Murmansk. However, Adolf Hitler had far-reaching plans for the Soviet Arctic. Taking advantage of the desolation of the polar expanses, the Germans created bases on the islands of the Arctic Ocean. The largest of them was located in the Franz Josef Land archipelago. Germans in the Arctic, control of the Arctic, this was a strategic importance for the Third Reich. Here were the routes of sea convoys that delivered products and raw materials to the USSR under Lend-Lease. But to plan operations against the Allied fleet, the Kriegsmarine headquarters needed information about storms. So the Germans considered the Soviet land of Franz Josef to be one of the most suitable places to observe the weather. Presumably, even before the World War II, Hitler ordered to set up a Luftwaffe stronghold in the area, and in March of 1941, Soviet pilots observed Dornier 215 bomber aircraft in the area of the islands. And in 1942, the Führer approved a project to combat the northern convoys, codenamed Wunderland. As part of the operation, the weather expedition Treasure Hunter, or Schatzgraber, was sent to Franz Josef Land. So on October 15, 1943, the staff of the Kriegsmarine Weather Service arrived on the steamer Kedinge from the Norwegian port of Tromsø to Alexanderland, the westernmost point of the archipelago islands. But my impression was that they were on site in 1942. I'm reading you available Russian information, so we'll see. 4 meteorologists, a technician, and 5 soldiers were stationed at the so-called base number 24 in the area of Cape Nimrod. The leaders of the expedition were Lieutenant Alfred Makus and scientist Walter Tries. The task of the expedition was not only to observe the weather. With the help of direction-finding devices, the Germans tracked the activity of the Allied ships in the Arctic Ocean. In the area of base number 24, there was an airstrip, and under the rocks on the coast, there was a secret shelter for submarines. The Germans built 5 dugouts half a kilometer from the shore so that they could not be detected from the sea. The residential bunker had 7 rooms, a bedroom, a kitchen, a dining room, and a pantry. It could accommodate up to 30 people. In order for the buildings to merge with the snow, the fascists disguised them with the white oil paint. In 2016, the buildings perfectly preserved in the northern climate were examined by the staff of the Russian Arctic National Park. In total, Russian researchers removed 600 items of German origin from Alexander's land. So not 500, but 600. I wonder what the missing 100 were and why we're being given different information. Anyway, gasoline cans, bullets, documents, and shoes marked with swastikas were found. It is noteworthy that the war against America did not prevent any of the soldiers or meteorologists from reading the adventures of Tom Sawyer. The expedition members were ready to repel the attack. In the arsenal of base number 24, there were machine guns and mortars with ammunition, hand grenades, and jumping mines. Sprang minute number 35. Was it their search of mythical Hyperborea that brought them there? There is a hypothesis that the Nazis' interest in the northern islands was dictated not only by military considerations. Many of the NSDAP, or Nationalsozialistische Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, National Socialist German Workers' Party, personalities at the dawn of their political careers were members of the occult Thule Society. This was the name of the legendary northern island described by ancient authors. Germanic esoteric enthusiasts considered the city of Ultima Thule to be the capital of the mythical Hyperborea, where the ancestors of the Aryan race allegedly moved to after the death of Atlantis, or demise of Atlantis, and from where they then settled in Europe. Theoretically, any of the islands from Greenland to Novaya Zemlya in Russia fit the description of Thule Island. It is unknown, at least to us, whether the Germans conducted archaeological research on the harsh rocks of the Soviet islands, or whether they tried to get in touch with the ancestors with the help of pagan rituals. I told you, lurid practices, but they were serious about them. However, no search for Hyperborea, as is known, it didn't affect the outcome of the Second World War. At the end of the expedition, the food of the Germans abandoned in the far north was extremely poor and monotonous. This is evidenced by the many remaining cans of sardines from Portuguese production on the island. Therefore, when a professional hunter, Werner Blackenburg, shot a polar bear, none of the members of the expedition refused to taste its raw meat. As a result, the Germans became infected with trichinosis, a disease that poses a threat to life. This explains why there's so much material evidence of the expedition's stay at the base number 24. The evacuation from the island was carried out in a great hurry. In July of 1944, a BV-138 seaplane was urgently sent for the sick meteorologists. Some of the valuable equipment was later taken out by the Nazi military who were aboard the submarine that was sent there. Now, for the Soviets, the presence of the Kriegsmarine on Franz Josef Land remained a secret until 1947, when the German buildings were discovered from the air by the polar aviator pilot Ilya Mazuruk. In 1951, the base was surveyed by the Arctic Project Survey Party. This is still a very secretive Soviet project, and I mentioned it in my other videos, but there is little information available about it, real information. During the Cold War, the Soviet military also appreciated the strategic importance of Alexandra Land. You can imagine the Americans also paid attention to it. A polar weather station and a border outpost appeared there. According to some sources, the Russians used the runway built by the Germans. According to others, they built their own. It was only in the 1980s that the entire territory of the island was cleared thanks to the help of Rudolf von Garbati, a member of the German expedition. Currently, there is a base of the Russian border service or border guards of the FSB. I told you this is like the KGB nowadays of Russia on Alexandra's Land in the village of Nagurskaya. Well, Nagurskaya is the location of the base of the border guard service of the FSB of Russia, called Nagurskaya, and the Arctic Trelistnik or Shamrock military base, the northernmost airfield in Russia. It is located at the northern tip of the Alexandra Land island of the Franz Josef Land archipelago. It is named after the Russian polar pilot Nagursky. This is a very interesting base, and I mentioned it in my other videos, and I am sure Russian adversaries are building their own bases. Well, we'll talk about a little bit later. The Nagurskaya Polar Station got its name, from the airbase of the same name, the place for which was chosen in 1947 by the chief of polar aviation, as I mentioned, and he was the hero of the Soviet Union, Mazuruk. Ilya Pavlovich Mazuruk recalled how he discovered the German weather station, and after the war, he chose this place for the Arctic Air Base. One day, a radio operator comes running. An unknown radio station is located in the Tikhaya Bay on the Franz Josef Land. What the hell? From where did it come from? I lived there for a year when I was on duty during the Papanian Drift expedition. I climbed everything there. There should be no one there. So they prepared an SB plane for me, and I flew there. I wandered over the islands. I looked in one of the bays of the land of Alexandra or Alexandra Land. The fascists are located. Tents are standing, temporary houses, a radio station is deployed, and a submarine is hanging out on the water. The base you see was built there. They spotted my SB and hit me with all their firepower. The engine was hit, the control was jammed. I had to leave. I reached one familiar long cape, sat down landed without releasing the chassis. The radio station is intact. I told them what happened to me, to the Soviets, and soon Syracuse came for me on a seaplane. Our people quickly got to that base, started shooting. The fascists were gone, although apparently they were going to dig in on Alexander's land for a long time. When we arrived there, we found a lot of goods, boxes with weapons, ammunition, food, covered with tarpaulin, and an iron net from bears stood on the ice in the house. There were stocks of warm clothes, machine guns. After the war, when I was already the head of the polar aviation, we had to settle in the Arctic seriously and for a long time. New airports and runways were being built. Working necessity made me remember the Cape on which I left my SAT airplane. We figured it out. You can create your own airbase there. In 1951, during a flyby of Alexanderland, a group of Soviet polar pilots, with the participation of navigator Akuratov, discovered a bright white rectangular spot near the shore against the background of a rocky thawed tundra, which turned out to be the roof of a dugout painted with white paint. As it became known from the documents found in the dugout, a meteorological group of 10 people was landed on the island under the leadership of Lieutenant Marcus and scientific supervisor Dries. The expedition began its work on October 15, 1943. There was also a professional hunter in the staff of the group, Werner Blankenburg, who shot a large polar bear. The entire staff of the station, poisoned by bear meat, fell ill with trichinosis and was evacuated on a Focke-Wulf 200 aircraft. So this is what the Soviet pilot recalled. I have to tell you something. There is something we're not told about the base and what was discovered there, and when the Nazis actually crawled there. I believe we should be as interested in the Arctic territories as our major and regional world powers today. Just look at the expansion of military power there. The United States, the Russians, the Canadians, the Europeans, even China is eager to get there. But I attribute a lot of it to the UFO and USO encounters in the area. And not to repeat my discoveries during my research of what's going on there. Please see my playlist about the Arctic and it's paranormal, and I will put a URL to the playlist in the description to this video. I am the primary civilian expert on the Russian encounters with UFOs and USOs, and I'm proud of my research, and I'm speaking about the Arctic, of course. I'm saying this to get others involved to the extent possible, because it's very interesting and there is a lot to do for everyone. Look, there is so much we can discover. If they will let us. Who they are is up to you to uncover. I want to thank those who support my research, people in England and other parts of the world, and I want to ask you, if you can, to support it through the links you will see in the description to this video, and if you can, please like my video, please subscribe to my channel, and please tell others. There's so much that I want to tell you more about, and I will, on different subjects pertaining in general to Eurasian paranormal, and then, we go down Russia, Ukraine, Central Asia, China, Mongolia, but other places in the world too. Africa, which I try to bring attention of people who listen to my videos to, especially to Namibia, other places. And I'll do my best to bring such information. It's exciting, and I thank you for listening to me.